All right, guys, Coach Chad back again. Now, we've discussed some performance tips with regard to pedaling, and now we're going to talk about performance tips or proper application of the push-pull on the handle. Now, this, of course, is what makes the air bike so devastating, is that we have a lot more musculature involved in the effort, other than a normal bike where it's mostly lower body. Now we actually have the upper body involved, which makes this a much more systemic workout tool, which we can use for conditioning, which makes it an ideal tool. Now, when you're on the air bike, there's actually a advantage when you're doing sprint variations to pushing and pulling on the handles. And this is going to create a coordinated effect that has to be learned how to do, where one arm is pushing, the other is pulling, and you're back and forth like this seesaw effect. But what you want to maximize the power output on here and get the flywheel turning, you're going to want to use your upper body as well as the lower body while you're moving. Now, this is very important, that this is really only occurs when you're doing sprint type events on the air bike. If you're doing longer intervals or prolonged efforts, so think about our 10-minute air bike test or any of the long anaerobic lactic intervals we do, or just very long steady state work on the air bike, you're only going to want to focus on the push, not the pull. If you're focusing on the push and pull, you're just going to add up much too much fatigue and too many muscle groups involved, which is going to take away from your performance. You want to create efficiency on your longer intervals and your longer time domains versus the sprint, where you need as much muscle mass involved to produce as much power on this unit. Okay, so a couple tips when you're working on the handles. We've already discussed the appropriate seat height so that we have the appropriate position here. But before we get into that, one of the other things you want to play with is what your optimal torso angle is. And the easiest way to find that is to do some pedaling without using your hands. So do some max effort pedaling on here, where you try and have a fairly high output pedal, and your torso will naturally fall into the line which it should be in. And for me, maybe it's about a 20-degree forward position, forward flexion at the hip. This is going to be my position that I'm going to maintain, and I want to try and make sure that I'm keeping a couple key points in place. One, I'm keeping my shoulder down and pat, right? So it's in a good position to be pushing and pulling. Secondly, I want to keep my elbow tucked in slightly to my body rather than having it flare out. And then also, I'd like to keep my wrist in a neutral position with the handle and my forearm for proper application of force into this machine right here. And then lastly, we're going to want to have a strong and efficient torso angle. You see too many times that people start to fall forward or start to do a lot of rotation. And with excessive fatigue, these things may just happen. But if you're trying to optimize your performance on here, you want strong midline stability so we don't have a lot of rotation or side-to-side movement. That way we have a better position to push and pull from. The shoulder and the back muscles and the chest muscles are all in a better position to produce force, okay? So again, if you were to start, the easiest way would be set your seat height, do your legs only pedal. You'll note the torso angle, grab onto the handle, and we start moving from here, okay? And this is how you're gonna start to learn, again, that nice forearm angle with the handles. So we're not trying to suicide grip or do any kind of weird gripping on the handles. We just keep a nice loose grip, but a neutral wrist position throughout. We keep the elbow tucked in. That way when we pull, we have appropriate strength and we have appropriate position on the shoulder as well as on the push. So when you're driving through the push, again, you're not gonna be excessively reaching or shortening your path too much as well. All right, so these are all small little pieces you can work on with regard to learning the arms or the push-pull on the air bike. You can even play with arms only work just to feel the action, and you don't want to have a lot of rocking and swinging going on. This takes away from your potential power output that you can put into the machine. Again, all things you'll have to play with, break those components apart, midline stability, minimal rocking, elbows tucked in, a nice strong neutral wrist position for ideal pushing and pulling. And again, I would like to reiterate, on sprint variations, you are going to be pushing and pulling. On longer durations, you will simply focus on the push component and relax on the pull component, right? And it will just make the whole movement much more efficient. It's the same idea as we discussed on the lower body, that we're not trying to claw the pedal back, because that becomes extra work that doesn't create any more efficiency or any extra power output that we can sustain over longer periods of time. I hope that helps, guys. Appreciate your time. Thank you.